So today, I really love today's session. It's a great session. I love to receive it. I love to give it. Today we're going to do head and neck. Okay? So yeah, it's pretty awesome. So as usual, we're going to talk about the bony landmarks first, and then we'll talk about the musculature that we want you to start becoming familiar with. Remember, you don't have to remember. Remember, you don't have to remember everything today, right? It's just so that you start hearing the words a little bit. Okay, so I think you learned a lot of this stuff in your first few days of anatomy. That you guys talked about the skull, right? So what's the bone in the front? The frontal bone. Yep. And then what about here? Nope, up here. What are these up here? Parietal. You haven't done the parietal bones yet? Okay, so up here, this isn't a great skeleton to use for the skull, but can you see these little squiggly lines up here? Those are called sutures, okay, and those are where the different bones of the skull come together, okay, and depending on who you talk to, some professionals say that there's no movement in those joints, but most of us that do massage, we know that there is movement that happens in those joints, especially people who practice craniosacral work. Have you heard of that? Yes. They deal with the movement that happens. They feel that movement that's happening in there. So where this little squiggly suture is, this bone here is the parietal bone, and you have one on each side, okay? Then if you come down a little bit into what we call the temporal area, then that's where you're going to find your temporal bones, okay? And then in the back, did you learn about this bone here? Yes, that's the occipital bones. We refer to it a lot as the occiput, okay? And this landmark right here, we felt that on palpation day. Do you remember when we came to the head of the table and we cradled our client's head? Some of you did it, some of you didn't. We felt this, what we call the occipital ridge, okay? And that's going to be an important bony landmark that we're going to talk about when we talk about muscles, okay? Also, you see this little bony place right here? Everybody feel it. Come behind your ears and feel that bump behind your ears. Anybody know what that's called? Mastoid process. Okay, do you know what bone that's a part of? No, good guess, because it sounds similar, but it's actually part of your temporal bone. Okay, and it comes down there. Why do you think we have this bony protuberance from our temporal bone? Lots of muscle attachments. Yes, that's a very good place to do friction or to spend some time focusing there, because there's a lot of muscle attachments that come in there. Okay, and then you also have, we're going to talk about this right here, which you used to call your cheekbone. Okay, and your cheekbone is made up of part of your temporal bone. I don't know if you can see it right here, but there's a little line right here. And your temporal bone comes out into part of this. And then you have your zygomatic bone. So your zygomatic bone and your temporal bone make up what we call the zygomatic arch. Okay? You'll hear some body workers will just refer to this as zygoma. Again, that's a craniosacral term that gets brought into massage sometimes. Okay? Another part of your zygomatic arch, can you see this line right here? What's this bone here? You know that. Your maxilla, right? So the maxilla is coming, your upper jaw. Do you guys you didn't go over that in anatomy? Some of you are saying yes, some of you are saying no. So your upper jaw is your maxilla. It's fixed. Your lower jaw, which he doesn't have, but it's movable, and it's your mandible, right? So your maxilla is also making part of your zygomatic arch. Okay? All right. Yeah, he's lost his... This is a terrible skeleton for today, because the mandible, yeah, is Doug in here? Or I was thinking if there's another skeleton that's handy, we could show the TMJ better. So your maxilla and your mandible and your temporal bone, it's really your mandible and your temporal bone. They come up and they form this joint that is called what? Temporal mandibular joint. I know in one of the groups we talked about already TMJ a little bit. Right. So raise your hand if you have TMJ. Yeah. So I can tell the people that were in that group because you're all raising your hand. Hopefully all of you have TMJ. Because if you didn't have a temporal mandibular joint, you wouldn't be able to talk to me. You wouldn't be able to eat, right? So a lot of you have heard of the condition TMJ, and you've heard people say, I have TMJ. Really what they mean by that is that they have TMJ dysfunction, right? There's something happening with that temporal mandibular joint that's causing them discomfort. Maybe it gets locked in an open position. Maybe it gets locked in a closed position. Maybe it just hurts, right? But that's what people mean. That's why sometimes you'll see it referred to probably on your test. It will be referred to as TMJD because that's temporal mandibular joint dysfunction. Okay, so let's take a look at that joint on a guy who hasn't lost part of his head, right? That's okay, we don't need arms today, right? So see this right here? See where the mandible articulates with the temporal bone. So that's how it gets its name, temporal mandibular joint, which again, we all have, but some of us have the unfortunate situation of having dysfunction in this joint. Why do you think sometimes dysfunction might arise in that joint?
Grinding at night.
Yeah, it could be grinding. We also use it a lot, don't we? So remember when we had our arthritis talk, we talked about like wear and tear, repetitive use. A lot of repetitive use is happening at this joint, right?
Stress.
Yeah, stress. People, not only do people grind, but they can also clinch, right? And so you can imagine the tension, and we're going to talk about muscles in a minute, but you can imagine the tension that's happening at that joint. Sean Patrick.
I have that my cartilage in my joint is deformed.
It's deformed. So what does that mean for you?
My jaw can lock in place.
Does it lock open or does it lock closed or both? I bet that's pretty uncomfortable.
Mine locks open.
Yeah.
And it feels like it.
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend that you try to make that happen. Like if you have a joint that
If I don't do it on a regular basis and it pops on its own, it's painful. When I do it myself, it doesn't hurt.
Okay. All right.
Do some massage therapists work inside the oral cavity?
Yes. Because there are muscles inside too. So especially anytime I've received that work, it was from someone who had cranial sacral training, but I'm sure that there are probably other massage therapists who learned that training as well. But yes, there are muscles in there that can really affect what's happening at this joint. So sometimes people do intraoral work. Okay? And then just to review, we're going to be doing some neck work. How many cervical vertebrae do you have? 7. What's this part of the vertebra called? What part? Spinous process. And then on the lateral side, you have the transverse processes. So process is a point that sticks out, right? Like mastoid process sticks out. Spinous process sticks out towards the spine. The transverse processes stick out lateral, okay? You're going to feel, you see this one here sticks out a little bit further than the others? That's your C2 vertebra, or your C1 vertebra, I'm sorry. And what's that called? Atlas, right. What's C2? Axis, right. Yep. Okay. Any questions about the bones? Okay. You ready to move to muscles? Okay. So what's the first thing you notice about the head on the muscle chart?
Bald.
He's bald, yes. Good one, Gary. Great observation. And what do you see instead of hair? You see connective tissue. So you see this white connective tissue here that starts at the back of the head and it wraps all the way around to the front, right? So do something with me. Put your hand at the base of your head, back here. And now, focusing in on what you feel in your hands, exaggerate raising and lowering your eyebrows. You guys are not getting videotaped doing this, right? Anybody feel that movement in the back? Raise your hand if you could feel your eyebrows, when your eyebrows moved, if you could feel it in the back of your head. Right. So this is like a swimmer's cap. You know the cap that swimmers wear? It's like this swimmer's cap of connective tissue, and it's called the Galea aponeurotica. So you remember aponeurotica is like an area of connective tissue that supports. And this one has its own special name, right? Can you imagine if that gets tight or gets locked down, how it could cause headaches? Okay. What do you think would be a good stroke to do to loosen up the Galea aponeurotica? Scritchies. Scritchies, yep. Or you could do friction. Sure, you could do friction too, right? Tapotement. You could do some light tapotement on the forehead. I don't know that it's going to affect that tissue that way, right? So this sometimes, I feel like scritchies are sometimes viewed as just like frivolous, like feel-good stuff, but they do really help with headaches. Like, so doing that, spending some good time doing that on the head can be really helpful. Okay. So if we go beneath that, or deep to that, what muscle do you think lies on top of the frontal bone? Frontalis. Yep. And then you have this one here you can see in red. What's that? Temporalis. What do you think lies on top of the occiput bone? Occipitalis. Yep. Now, below or inferior to occipitalis, you have a group of muscles called suboccipitals. Okay, and they get their name because they're below, sub meaning below, the occiput. And what they do is they come from the occiput down to the cervical vertebra. Okay, you have 8 pairs of them. And they're what's holding your head. I mean, look at your head compared to your cervical spine. It's like a bowling ball on a pencil, right? So those muscles are responsible for keeping your head from just rolling off your head, right? Can you along with some other muscles, but can you imagine how much strength they must have and how much tension could get built up in there? So again, doing some specific strokes like small mini effleurages or frictioning, that can feel really good in that area. Okay? All right. If we come back to the front, somebody mentioned this muscle earlier. They mentioned masseter muscle. And your masseter muscle, you can see it right here. This is the attachment site for it. It goes from your mandible to your zygomatic arch. Okay? And this little muscle right here is the strongest muscle in your body, pounds per square inch. Pounds per square inch. Okay, I always think of a snapping turtle. Have you heard how once they latch on, you're done, forget it, right? So this is part of why that joint, that TMJ joint, can end up causing people so much discomfort if people clinch or they grind. You know, there's a lot of tension that's loaded in that masseter muscle. Okay? Good. All right. So today we're gonna be doing, you also know there's I think 30 pairs of facial muscles. I think that is the right number. You learned a couple of them already. What's the one around your eyes? Oris. Or oculi. And then the one around your mouth is oris. Right? Okay. So now if we come to the neck, you can see the 2 different layers here. So you have this outer layer, the more superficial layer, there's this muscle called platysma. Okay, and this example becomes less relevant the longer that I teach, but raise your hand if you know the original or ever saw the original Incredible Hulk show. Oh, more of you than I thought. Do you remember the Lou Ferrigno, the guy that like played the Hulk before there was CGI? If you don't know it, go home and look it up. He had like the greatest platysma, right? Because he would go like this, and his muscle would just pop out, right? So if it's that muscle that if you go like this, everybody do it. You feel that? That more superficial muscle. Allie's got kind of a good one. Do it, Allie. See it right there? Yeah.
Incredible Allie.
Yeah, the Incredible Allie. So anyways, I just think that's a really fun way to remember that muscle. Just think like, right? Bodybuilders probably do the same thing. Okay, deep to that, you have one that you've probably heard of that's called, we refer to it as SCM. Sternocleidomastoid. Okay, so what are its attachment points? So, right, we're going to start with the mastoid process. It's going to come down. It has two heads. One of the heads attaches at the sternum, and one attaches at the clavicle. Sternocleidomastoid. This is a really great muscle to work. It's very important. For us today, it's also going to be a landmark for us. We are not going to go anterior to SCM. We're going to stay on SCM or lateral or behind it, posterior to it. Why do you think we're not going to go anterior to SCM? The throat, right? We've got some delicate structures there. Okay, so for now, you might in your advanced training, once you do advanced training in massage, you might learn how to work some muscles that are anterior to that. But right now in your training, you don't have enough training yet. Like that's something you learn later down the road. So right now, that's your good landmark to know don't go in front of that, don't go anterior to that. Okay, SCM is an important muscle that comes up for people who've been in car accidents. Sometimes it's referred to as the whiplash muscle because picture when my head comes forward, SCM shortens, and then it gets snapped back. And it gets snapped long, right? So that can be an important muscle to work when people have been in a car accident. Okay. You also have a group of muscles. You can't really see them very well on this chart, but they're called, as a group, we refer to them as scalenes. Have you heard of scalenes? So, like the deltoid, you have an anterior, middle, and posterior. So you have anterior scalenes, middle scalenes, and then your posterior scalenes are smaller, but you've still got them. You've got a posterior section. They come down and they attach on the rib cage. So they help us with respiration, inspiration particularly, right? So they help us breathe in. You might notice some people that either have breathing difficulties or who smoke, you might notice those muscles will be a little bit tighter because they're struggling to help with breath, you know, to open us up so that our lungs can fill with air. Okay, so they're pretty important. Okay. What, I forgot to mention it at the beginning because it was cut away and I get so excited about platysma. But what's the most superficial muscle that's wrapping around to the front? The one that's right on top? Trapezius, right. So don't forget about trapezius. So trapezius is this back muscle, but then it comes around and is attaching along the clavicle, right? So that's an example of your back. What's happening in the back affecting what's happening in the front and vice versa, right? Also, do you remember, just a short review, do you remember this muscle here that attaches on your superior angle and comes up to your cervical spine? Yeah, levator scapula, elevates your shoulder blade, right? So that's coming up and attaching at the neck. You won't learn it today, but there's a way to access levator from the front. right? So you also have, deeper neck muscles that we haven't even mentioned yet that are coming up here. So the neck is a good example of there's this relationship that we keep talking about from front to back, right, and side to side. Okay. Any questions about what we've talked about? Yeah.
The platysma and the SCM, which is superficial, which is deep?
So you have traps is the most superficial, but it's coming down here. It's not coming up into the neck. And then you have platysma, and then you have SCM under that. So you can always tell if you come up and look at your muscle chart, you can always tell it's going to have one side that's more superficial, and it's going to have one side where the superficial tissue's been cut away to reveal what lies deep to it. So on this side, you can see that you don't have a view of SCM, right? Because it's showing platysma. On this side of the muscle chart, platysma has been peeled away, and now you can see SCM. So that's how you can sort of tell in your books and on the muscle chart, the layers. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
It's not, it's related.
Mhm.
I've been curious, as a massage therapist, is there any way to access somewhere cadaver lectures?
Yeah. Have you guys been exposed to the Ackland series? Yeah, so there's a few different resources available to you. First of all, there's this really great app that a lot of the teachers will start using in class with overheads. It's called Essential Anatomy. And it's not a cadaver, but it's you can peel off the layers, you can add layering of muscles and pull them off. But it's a computer, it's CGI, right? Or not CGI, but it's computerized. But if you want to look at cadaver stuff, there's a series called Ackland. It's Ackland. And he did a whole series of cadaver videos. They're very expensive, but we used to offer them in the bookstore. I don't know if we still do or not.
I think so.
But you could look online. You could get it from Amazon or something like that. But they're pretty expensive. But they are all pretty awesome. I have them. They're really cool.
Stuff and it does honestly help me, but I just want to really
Yeah.
grasp it and never forget it.
Yeah, I think Ackland, some people, it's not realistic for them because they're pricey, they're expensive. But the reason they're expensive is, it took a lot to make those videos. And they are really awesome, and you do really get to see it in a way that you don't on a two-dimensional or even three-dimensional way. So you might want to look that up and just see if that's something for you. I think they're really cool. Frank has them sometimes. Who do you have for kinesiology? Frank. Ask Frank about them. He sometimes uses them in class, and I know that he has them. So he could show you what it looks like so that you could order.
So we won't actually need face cradles for today. Now you can, and a lot of people do, work on necks when the client is prone. And for now, because we haven't touched into necks yet, I think it's much more reasonable to start with the person supine. And until you learn the anatomy a little more, it's important to be careful with the neck. And it's a really sweet place to learn how to be with your client and holding their head, which for some people is really challenging to let go of their head. So I think learning all of those basics and foundations first before we go into any other techniques where they might be prone or face down. You're learning those words, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. And what's face up?
Supine.
Good. Okay, good. So that's what we're going to work with today. It's just with our client supine. Okay? So let's just check in, see how you're doing today. Any particular reason you wanted to have the demo for today?
No particular reason, just overall tension and general stress. I do also have TMJ dysfunction on the left side of my jaw.
Okay. Always? Since you can remember kind of thing? Or
Since about the onset of puberty, 12 or 13.
Hormones rule the world. That's my forever statement. Did you wear braces?
No, never
Okay.
with braces. I've always been a teeth clencher and grinder when I'm stressed.
Uh-huh. And does that still happen?
Occasionally. Not as much. As long as I manage my stress, it's not nearly as prevalent.
Okay. Do you wear a night guard? Mouth guard? No? Okay.
I usually grind right through them in a night or two. I've tried them.
Okay. All right. How are you feeling today?
Feeling pretty good today. I had a really relaxing weekend.
Okay. So less stress. And do you feel that in your TMJ?
I do. I
Okay.
can tell that I haven't been grinding my teeth the last few nights.
Okay. Any neck injuries, falls, car accidents?
Not in the last couple of years.
But before that?
I was in a car accident about 2 years ago. Just no major injuries, no broken bones, just soft tissue damage and bruising.
What kind of, do you mind if I ask you what happened?
I was making a left-hand turn in the rain and didn't see the oncoming car, and I was hitting the front passenger side quarter panel.
Okay. That's kind of scary.
Very scary. I still can't make that left-hand turn at night.
Oh, yeah.
Go down, turn around, and make it right.
Yeah, understand. So afterwards, even months or even a year afterwards, did you have any changes? Headaches, neck stiffness, back pain? Or did it resolve pretty easily?
It all resolved pretty easily.
That's
I do
good.
yoga and meditation on a regular basis, and that seemed to help with the recovery.
Oh, good.
And stretching
Okay.
and whatnot.
All right. Good. Any other physical?
No, I get migraines,
Okay.
chronic migraines. I do take medication for that.
When did those start?
Those started at about age 16 and got worse with my second pregnancy 7 years ago.
Hormones rule the world.
And they've been
Okay.
continuously worse since they got worse. with my
Oh, I'm sorry
pregnancy.
about that. Okay, so you take medication for that. Do you take it on a regular basis or just when you get them?
I've got a preventative that I take on a regular basis and one that I can take as needed if a migraine creeps through.
All right. Anything today?
No,
Okay.
nothing today.
All right. Is there anything else you would like for me to know about you
No,
or that you would like to know about me?
no, I think I'm good.
Okay. All right. We're going to get started. I'm actually going to raise this table up one notch. So I'm feeling too high on my stool. You're going to lay on your back facing the ceiling. Undress to what's comfortable for you. Probably just need your top parts off. You'll be covered at all times. You'll be under the sheet. And I will come back in a few minutes. Yes.
What's a good rule of thumb for the height of the table with a stool?
Well, it depends on your person. It depends on your height. It's you want your legs at least to kind of be at the same height of the table. I don't want to have to bend over too far. I also don't want to have to reach up too far. So, and so now that she's on here, I can even, I knew I can adjust the stool a little bit, but I can't adjust the table once she's on it. So I'd rather be able to go up and down a little bit on the stool, and I probably am going to go up a little bit here. Now that I put her up. Yeah. Okay, so you have two options today, to use your shea butter or your cocoa butter. Anybody had the melting in the car experience yet? Yep, they're here. They're available here. So the cocoa butter is one piece, which you can completely take out if you want. And if I were to use it, I would be just rubbing it between my hands like this. Okay, it's much tackier. It's not as oily. So when we work on head and neck, which tends to have a lot of its own natural oils anyway, more than the rest of the body, I don't need to use a lot of lubricant usually. Okay, and then my other option is the shea butter. And if you're going to use the shea butter, you just need a little bit. So it's a little harder now because it's a little colder. So if I were to use it, I would probably just use a little bit like that. And then I can put it on my hand. And I try not to do it right over her face, Okay, so it's also a little tacky, which is good, and that helps with moving and working with the neck. So you don't have to be slippery and slidey, like when we're working with the other parts of the body as much in Swedish. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this out here, I think. Do you have one preference? Do you know the smell of this?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about it? Would you?
I love the smell of both
Okay.
of them. So
Okay.
whichever you prefer to work
Okay.
with.
All right. I like them both. I'm not a real snob on lubricants, as long as I could eat them, which I could. I just wouldn't want to. So as long as it's okay for me to take in, I like different feels and qualities and choices, and my table has probably 20 different choices of lubricant. So, and then you'll meet some people who are like, I'm only using shea butter, ever. I'm only using cocoa butter. So you just have to decide what you like as a therapist. Okay. So a couple things when we go to work with the head is, one is that the proximity of my face and her face, right? We're kind of closing in on that a little bit. So what do I need to be aware of? My hair, my breath. So if you had a big garlic dinner last night, your client's going to know about that. If you had a bunch of cigarettes last night, your client's going to know about that, even if you didn't have any this morning. If you drank a big cup of coffee. So this would be a great time to use your wow drops before you start today. And some people even put them in water, and that helps, with the chlorophyll to help digestion a little bit. So the other thing I want to be careful of is that I'm not going to be working, I'm not going to be like this. Okay, so if I'm going to be working close, which I am, I can always just put my head off to the side and work on either side, and that works well. My hands are cold. I'm just going to tell you that ahead of time because I feel you're hot, so it's going to feel different. So the other part about the head and neck is what I talked about earlier, is the vulnerability of moving somebody's head around, or the potential, or if someone's had some kind of neck trauma or any trauma. Sometimes that makes it difficult. So I need to be really conscious of that and really use my tracking skills to make sure that I see if I need to check in with her at all about anything that's maybe happening or not happening. And I'm just going to trust that you're going to tell me if I need to slow down, if I need to lighten up, if something needs to be changed in some way.
Absolutely.
Okay. So my first contact is just going to be that. It's just going to be a contact. I'm not going to go moving right into doing a stroke. I'm just going to lay my hands on her shoulders, and it's just kind of the hello. Okay? And let her get used to my hands. And you guys can feel free to come as close as you would like. I know several of you have. It's always better if you can actually see what's happening, because this isn't one where I move around a lot. I'll just be sitting here. So a nice stroke to begin to warm up the neck is, what do you imagine that would be called? Effleurage, yes. So I'm going to come sliding across the top of the back and shoulders. And then I'm just going to come sliding up the back of the neck. So this just gives me some information about her tissue, and if there's any place that feels tight. She might even notice if maybe there's a place that feels tighter. So now I'm going to go underneath, and I do that by walking, just kind of walking my hands under and pressing the back of my hands on the table so that I don't pinch her skin as I walk my hands under. Not too far yet, but later on I'll go a little further. Okay. And then I can do some strokes up this way. And I'm going to do, it's almost like a shingling on the back of the neck.
One hand's always supporting.
And it's important with the head that one hand is supporting the neck. Otherwise, it's just going to flop around. And then they're going to have to hold. And then they that increases tension.
Are you finding mild traction with every?
Mm-hmm. So as my hand goes up, her spine is in the middle of my hand, and as it comes up, my fingers and the heel of my hand hook onto the occiput, and then I can pull slightly in traction as I come up. And I come up into the hairline, so I don't just stop. Like, just because we have hair doesn't mean there isn't fascia anymore. And so now my fingers, I'm just going to bring your head up so they can see. So you see where my fingers are kind of hooked around the occiput? So feel your own occiput. And so your fingers you can kind of hook your fingers around, and you can apply traction, pressure. We'll even do some friction there in a little bit. But what I'm going to use it for right now is a way to turn her head easily. So I'm going to turn her head slightly to the right, but her head is lying on the table, but I'm still using my right hand to support her head. So she can stay really nice and relaxed. Because if I let go, I'm going to show you what happens when I let go. And if I start to work over here, if I push, you know, she's going to have to resist me if I'm not doing anything useful with this hand. So I don't want her to have to work. So I'm going to go back over here and make my little handle. And you can see I'm using my leg just to support my elbow. So that makes it very easy for me. And then I'm going to go along the side of her neck, starting just behind the ear. Did you guys talk about mastoid process in the muscle chart? Okay, so find your own mastoid process. Okay, that's a good landmark to know, and that's a good place to start. So I'm going to start, because this place is smaller, with just 2 finger pads. And then as I move inferiorly, I can bring in more of my hand. When I get to this place where her top of her back comes in, you may feel like you can't go any further, or you feel stopped. So at that point, you're going to press your palm into the side of her neck, and that's going to help you make your turn. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. And I'm not trying to not answer you. A lot of them. You know, I mean, we could go through, you're going to be hitting traps a little bit, you're going to be hitting a little bit of SCM, you're going to be hitting just the superficial fibers of scalings. But if you start thinking about all of that, you're not going to be thinking about what you're feeling. And that's what I want you to be thinking about in these early days is, what do you feel under your fingers? So as I move through here, I'm pushing also from my palm. That allows me to make that corner and go all the way out. Still holding with my right hand, holding her head nice and stable on her occiput. So that way I can provide a little traction this way too. Coming around the shoulder, and then I can come back. As I come back, putting the back part of my hand onto the table, I can use the table like a lever. You see how I'm kind of pushing up? And now I can push into muscles at the top of her back, and I could even stop and do some friction.
Would you mind repeating that on the side?
I'm actually not going to do it, so if you want to come over here, yeah, just because for you guys so you'll have time to practice. I may do a little bit, but I'm not going to do the same thing. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's better to know.
So I'm just doing some friction, and then I'm effleuraging up just on the side of the spine into the occiput again, which is another great place to do friction. How are you doing, Deanne?
That feels fantastic.
Okay. There's so many muscles here that can cause tension, that pulls on the rest of the fascia in the head, that if you can work in this area can often release so much other tension for your client. A good amount of pressure. Yeah, I mean, I'm using, I don't know how to say that, but I'm having to support with my right hand, otherwise her head would go pushing. Yeah, it's not just this light little da 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 da. You know, I'm not washing her hair.
She's not petting me.
No, I'm not petting. So I'll do this stroke again for you guys on the other side of the room.
Now, if you have someone who wants more pressure there, you just push in harder. And how does your back feel whenever you're leaning on that? Are you using more hips?
It feels okay. Yeah, I feel like I'm moving from my, still my lower body, just by rocking, do a lot of rocking. So now what is this? Petrissage, one-handed petrissage, right? And when I feel a place that gets a little thicker or harder, then I can stop in and do some more friction. Is there anything that you would like for me to do differently?
No, okay.
Okay, so we've got some, we did some effleurage, we did some petrissage, we did some friction.
Do you have any tips for hair, as far as anything you make note of?
Usually when someone's laying supine like this, it's easier if they take their hair out of whatever clip or rubber band or whatever that they have. And then when they're laying prone, it's easier if they have it up, you know, tied up. I usually even have something in my office for them to use if they don't have anything, like a clip, like that. So even though I'm going to use my thumb here, do you see how I brought it close to the rest of my hand? So I'm going to give it some support. Because this is a place that feels like it might be able to use a little more attention. I don't know, what do you feel here?
Yeah, I didn't realize there was tension there, but now that you're working on it, that feels really, really good.
So now I just switched it up and brought my fingers around so I could use them too.
Do we do any rubbing on the ears at all?
So like Tanya said, we're going to just stay on this side of the SCM. So I can do little, it's almost like some little small effleurage strokes. Okay. Is there anything you notice, Ian, on your left side?
feeling much more relaxed than when I first got on the table.
Okay.
And I'm feeling a little lopsided between the left and right.
I will sneak in a little bit. I just didn't want to go through the whole thing again on this side, so you guys can have your practice time. I want to show you all some work on the face. And then I also want to show you some neck stretches that we're going to do today. So with work on the face, it's nice to work against gravity, because gravity takes us over, right? So I'm not going to do a lot of pushing towards her feet, but instead I'll do more work towards the top of her head, okay? But just to begin, and just to note that I'm going to always come in from the sides when I'm working on the face. I'm not going to like plop on top of her, right? Or just like go right for her nose. I'm going to come in from the sides. I might even choose the forehead first, even though I don't have to. And I'm just going to move out towards the edges. Yeah, so you can use fingers. I could even use the heel of my hand. I could even stand up. I don't usually, but I could.
Is there a fine line between that feeling good and feeling like you're about to rip the skin apart?
I don't think so.
Because I felt at times if someone goes the opposite way, it's like, oh, you're stretching my skin. I know you have the moisture, but it just almost looked like.
Yeah, it's a little different on the face. I know what you're saying, but it's, I don't know, does it feel like I'm ripping your skin apart?
Not even a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, somehow it's almost like a stretch, because we don't get to stretch our faces very much.
You could really spend almost a whole hour on that.
Absolutely.
Shoulders.
So I can travel down the nose, go out, look along the sinuses. And if somebody has like really stuffy sinuses or allergies, like feel along your own cheeks right now, just under that ridge. It's nice to kind of, yeah, puffy.
My mom used to rub my face when I had really bad allergies when I was little.
So I'm just doing some little, almost some little baby frictions here.
Is it underneath?
Yep. So I'm kind of pressing up towards her eyes. Yeah.
What about like if somebody has really oily skin on their face and maybe even moderate to severe acne? Obviously we don't want to deny them the relaxation, but
Yeah.
is there anything we can
Maybe I would start there and not even put anything on my hands. And I would certainly ask them if it was okay, or if they had a lot of makeup on, I might ask them if it's okay, or if I knew they were going back to work.
Is acne a local contraindication?
Yeah. If you're answering it on the state board exam, yes.
Acne is a
Local contraindication. Don't get massage on the face.
So now I'm moving along to the chin area. Sweeping my strokes up. You see how I'm always coming in on the sides here? I'm not surprising her. I could even do some little... Now what about if somebody has facial hair? Anybody, you have facial hair, so what does it feel like when people go against the grain as opposed to with the grain? What feels better to you?
They both feel good for me.
Okay.
It's long enough, yeah.
So general rule of thumb is go with the grain if they have hair. So you might want to just go sort of down.
You know, I've actually been wondering.
Everybody's a
that
little
with
different.
leg hair. If someone has leg hair stubble and I'm going. You
You can always just ask them.
More oil.
I did this, it was one of those things I found, like, if you go, not that I have a lot of hair, but if you go slow enough, you'll just feel the hair kind of unroll underneath your fingers. It won't feel like you're pulling at all if you go slow enough. It will just kind of flip out.
Yep.
They won't feel it.
Slow is always better.
Yeah.
So now I'm in that TMJ area. So find your own, open and close your mouth. You feel that joint. And I'm just doing some friction. How's this feeling to you?
It feels really good.
Okay, it's not too much for that?
No, the
Okay.
pressure's perfect.
So I know for her, I might even spend a little extra time here, wouldn't I? Because she talked about that as a chronic issue for herself.
I've talked to a couple people who actually go into the mouth and will pull it outwards, kind of. Is that something? I mean, how would you assess the appropriate time in which you might want to incorporate that?
You would get the training to do that, and that is a more advanced work. When you go into the mouth, you have to have gloves. You have to be really careful about how you're explaining it, what you're doing, if they want to do that. And for somebody like Deanne, I would do that. Yeah.
Do you have that training?
I do.
Can you feel the difference on that left side?
Mm-hmm.
You can feel it, like, just kind of.
Yeah. So now I've just straddled the ears with my index finger and my third finger. And that usually feels good for people. She's nodding. So ears, somebody asked about ears. Do we want to massage ears? Yes, of course. So, you know, be careful. She's got some piercings, so I'm going to be conscious of that and not massage right over them. But it's good to, you know, in Chinese medicine, massaging the ears is like working with the whole body. So it's like the apple a day thing is massaging your ears. So even for yourself, you know, give yourself ear massages. So I'm working down towards her feet and pulling out slightly, not like yanking her ears. And I'm moving very slowly.
In the beginning, before they get positioned, if they want to, should we ask or recommend that they take their piercings that they can remove out?
I could. Yeah, like I might for earrings. I probably wouldn't bother with the piercings, but. And now I'm behind the ears, because think of when Tanya was talking about all of this fascia, this bathing cap. This bathing cap is really nice to loosen up. So I'm moving that fascia. See if you can do that yourself on the top of your head. So super glue your finger pads to your head, and now move that fascia over that deeper tissue. You feel how it kind of moves back and forth? Yes.
I've had a migraine on a tennis court before, and I gave myself a massage up here, and it went away.
Mm-hmm. Great.
This might be a little out there, but if you're doing this work and notice that they have lice, do you then offer to put like a towel down? Do you get gloves, or you just continue?
Like a hair on fire.
So that would be another contraindication because it's very communicable. So I would tell them that they would, you know, they should go have it taken care of, and maybe I would go work in a different area.
But you would leave them with their sheets like that? You wouldn't put anything under their head?
Well, it's over if they're already laying here,
Okay.
so I'm going to have to clean everything really well.
Would you have to replace it?
No. No. And just so you know, I've never had that experience. So,
I think if somebody has lice, they usually know it.
yeah.
They're not gonna go, I would think, embarrass themselves like.
Okay, so refocus. So I'm going to move into some of the neck stretches that we're going to do. So you did some of the actions last week in class. Who remembers what they are?
What was the question?
The actions of the neck. Okay, so we have lateral flexion. So we have lateral flexion to the right, lateral flexion to the left.
Extension.
Flexion, forward flexion. Extension back to neutral. Some people will say extensions this. Some people will call this hyperextension. We don't have to argue about who says what. Just know that it's stated differently in different books. Okay, what else? What other action is there? Rotation. So if I'm going to turn to look over my shoulder, I need to be able to rotate my head to the left. I need to be able to rotate my head to the right. So we're going to practice these as a group when you go into your practice time today. So I'm going to show you these. I'm going to come up the back of the neck. I'm going to hold my fingertips along the occiput. So I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm like this, and these fingers are holding here. This is the occiput laying here, and I'm just kind of hooking my fingers in, okay? So I'm just going to do a few stretches with you, Deanne. Just let me know when it feels like a comfortable stretch, no pain, feels good, and you don't want me to go any further.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm going to get myself a solid purchase on the floor because I may need to stand up. Okay? And I'm going to pull in traction slightly. And I'm going to start by bringing her face towards the ceiling. So I'm not going to smash her chin into her chest. I'm going to bring her face towards the ceiling, and then I'll start moving forward. Okay? Okay, and then I'll just come down. And as I come down, I make sure that my stool is still here. Okay. Another way you'll see that in the book, I think they showed you the cross arm one. So I'm going to bring my hand underneath and hold on. Okay, you can let your head rest on my hand. Bring my other hand under here. Okay, and then her head is in the V of my forearms. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm stabilizing her shoulders onto the table. So it changes the stretch slightly. That's good. Okay.
Would you do both, or
You could.
between two?
I don't do this one as much because I'm short, and it just doesn't work as well for me. But a lot of people really like it. So I would say for today, try it both, so you can see what works for you.
One thing I noticed about that, not only being short, but being
Mm-hmm. That's right. If you're larger breasted, it won't work either because you don't want to. You have their breast right. Yeah, that would be inappropriate. Okay, so that's forward flexion. 2 ways to do forward flexion. Now we're going to do lateral flexion. So let's see lateral flexion, everybody. Yes. So ear towards the shoulder. Face stays forward. Okay? So her face is going to stay forward. I'm going to go back to that same place of hooking my fingers under the occiput. I'm going to keep her head on the table. I'm not lifting it up. And I'm just going to scoot her head along the table, bringing her right ear towards her shoulder. Right lateral flexion. Let me know when you feel a comfortable stretch. Now when I get to a place where I start to feel a little bit of resistance, I can let go of my right hand and I'm going to cross over to stabilize her left shoulder. Okay.
It's hard to see from here. Are you pushing your arm against her cheek at all?
No. And I'll do the other side too. Coming back. So left lateral flexion, face stays forward, hooking onto the occiput, sliding her head along the table. So I'm not lifting it up and doing it this way. I'm just sliding it along the table, not letting her head turn. Okay, now I'm going to let go over here, cross over. And by doing this, I can stabilize her head staying in the same position better than if I try to do this and pull this way. You see what's going to happen? You guys are still going to do it, but it's hard to get this one right. It's a little bit of a challenge to do the crossy over thing. So I'm crossing over, stabilizing. See, I'm pushing on the shoulder. I'm helping with this stretch. So I'm pushing down towards her feet, and then I continue the stretch.
That's good.
Okay. And pulling and traction, in and out of a stretch, pulling and traction as much as you can. Okay, what's left? Rotation. Okay, extension is she's doing it. Okay, hyperextension we're not going to do. Compromises the disc too much. We're not going to do a stretch that way. We're not going to go back. Or some people call this extension, like I said. Okay, so rotation. I'm going to place her ear between my index finger and my third finger. Okay, this hand is going to go up the back of her neck, and I'm going to hook onto the occiput again. It's always my purchase because it really is a good way to move the head around and do traction and stabilize it. Okay, you know what I mean by purchase? It's always where I hang on to. Okay, and then this is the one where you're going to actually turn, rotating as if you're trying to keep her spine straight. So I'm turning, helping her look over her shoulder, holding on to the occiput with my right hand, giving her support with my left. When I get to a place where I start to feel a little bit of resistance, I can move this hand up to here and assist just gently on the side of the face.
So that's rotation.
That's rotation. Rotation to the left.
That's good.
Okay. And always moving very slowly with the head. You're not jerking them around. You're not moving quickly. They'll be able to relax more and go with it. If you start moving really fast, chances are they're going to hang on for dear life.
And then the placement of the fingers on the side of the head, where the ears are, that's to hold it down so it doesn't fold.
No, it's to hold it so her face doesn't just fall out of my hand. Because if I started here, what would happen is I wouldn't have anything to, there's no support here. But if I can change it to here, then I get much better support for her. And I'll do that over here. So index finger, middle finger, where the ear is. Fingers on the occiput with my left hand.
That's good.
Okay. That was good. I didn't even have to change my hand because that was enough for her. Okay, we're just coming in and out of these stretches right now. We're not holding, we're not resisting, we're not, at this point, it's the foundation level of just a simple static stretch. Okay? And then one last thing I can do. Somebody asked about how far can you go down. So what I can do is walk my hands down gradually by pushing into the back of the table with the back of my hand, and then lifting up. You see how I'm kind of lifting her up? And then I can go down a little further with my other hand. And then I can lift up and I can go a little further. And you see how I'm bringing my face off so I'm not like right over her face? And then I'm going to slide up either side of the spine.
I'm sorry, is this a stroke or is it a, okay, not a stretch?
It's like a little finishing stroke.
The palms are flat.
I'll show you how I have my hands positioned. So I started here, this, and then you have to do the sound effects too. So what we're going to do in practice is we're going to walk you through those stretches just right away before you start practicing in both rooms. So what will, as quickly as you can, you'll get yourselves on the table so that we can do that, and then you'll be on your own for the actual practice part, and we'll walk around and help you. Are there any questions before we do that?